They didn't forget my son. They wrote him out and expected me to smile for the pictures. My name's Mark Ellison. I'm 47 and teach U.S. history at a public high school in Burlington, Vermont. I've been in Luca's life since he was 5. Math facts on the fridge, first wobbly bike ride, emergency room for a split chin, science fair volcano that wouldn't stop foaming and flooded the gym floor. He's 17 now. He calls me Dad, the way you breathe, without thinking about it until someone asks you to prove how. The day the wedding invitation arrived, I was slicing an apple at the counter after school. The envelope was thick as a textbook cover, with gold foil edges and a wax seal pressed deep like someone wanted to prove they owned a stamp. I cracked the seal with a butter knife and read the script at the bottom twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Adults only. 21 and over. Strictly enforced. No exceptions. Lucas sat on the sofa, hood up, knees drawn, sketchbook braced against a thigh. He was working on a new mark for the clothing brand he swears he'll launch when he's got the money and the right heat press, someday packaged into lines and circles. I read the sentence aloud without sugar, the way I teach my students to read source documents. So I'm not invited, he said, not a question, eyes flicking up once and then back to his pencil. They made a rule, I said. It felt like dropping a stone in a cold lake. He nodded and dragged his pencil again, shading the curve of an O until it looked like a planet. I stood there with the invitation in my hand long enough for the apple slices to brown. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the wedding site, and clicked not attending. The confirmation email popped up like a tiny victory flag. I closed the computer, walked back to the sofa, and sat. Luca turned his pad toward me. Be honest, he said, chin lifting. This one, or the first version? A simple circle. The words first draft tucked inside at an angle that made it feel like motion. This one, I said. Feels like a brand already. He shrugged. Maybe I'll mess with the font. His pencil moved. His face settled. We went back to normal, which is to say we stayed where love lives when it's quiet. No lecture. No phone call to my brother. No storming over to my parents' place 2 blocks away to demand fairness like they keep it in a drawer labeled good silver. I didn't walk through a door that didn't want the kid I love inside. Not this time. My brother, Nate, texted an hour later, just long enough for performative concern to look spontaneous. Hey man, everything okay? That's Nate. Smooth voice, polished shoes, the kind of smile that photographs well even when it's lying. I wrote back. Luca wasn't invited. I'm not coming without him. He replied so fast, I pictured the bubbles cued before he read my message. Oh yeah, sorry if that read harsh. We're just trying to be consistent, you know? Keep it all 21 plus across the board. Consistent. Not kind. Not thoughtful. Not we screwed up. Consistent like the line on a policy sheet he could point at if anybody made him uncomfortable. We both knew the truth. This wasn't about liquor laws or venue rules. Luca wasn't wanted. Not in the photograph packages, not in the toasts, not in the choreography of a day where the word family is printed on menus, then folded up and tossed after the dessert course. I put the phone face down and sat with my son. He drew. I breathed. Sometimes love is as plain as that. Luca has always been quiet, not shy, watchful. He is the person at the edge of a busy room learning the room, charting the currents, sketching the people who believe no one sees them when they aren't speaking. Maybe he's always been like that. Maybe it started when his father left, when Luca was still soft-skulled and always hungry. By the time he was 5 and I showed up with a toolbox I only half knew how to use and a willingness to set 7 alarms just to make the school lunch cutoff. That's who he was, cautious and observant, stingy with trust and generous with attention. He called me Dad by accident. We were watching one of those cooking competition shows where grown adults cry about soufflés like the soufflé owes them rent. A contestant scorched his pan, the kind of burn you can smell through the TV. Luca pointed at the screen and said, "That guy burns stuff like you do, Dad." He froze. Lips parted. Eyes wide, like the word had jumped off a shelf without asking. "Sorry," he mumbled. "It's okay," I told him, trying to swallow the way the inside of my chest had cracked open. "You can call me whatever feels right." It stuck. I'd like to tell you that my people understood, that they greeted the word Dad like a new blessing and stitched it into place with care. They didn't. To my mother, Helen, he remained Mark's stepson, like a disclaimer at the bottom of a pharmaceutical ad. To my sister, Julia, he was the boy, which is what you call a neighbor's kid when you can't remember his name. Once, when he was 12, he drew a portrait of us. Me, Mara, my wife, Luca, and the dog who thinks the mailman delivers beef jerky. He framed it himself with cheap wood and brass tabs that never quite bent right. He gave it to my mother for Christmas, proud and earnest. "Oh, I'll have to find the perfect spot," she said, smiling at a point in the middle distance so she wouldn't have to look directly at the generosity. In March, I found the frame behind wrapping paper in the hall closet, the glass dusty, the top corner of the drawing bent. At a neighborhood Easter thing Julia threw, every kid had a basket with their names stenciled on it in swoopy letters, ribbons curling like party streamers. Luca got a plain straw one with a tag that said spring. He laughed, because he knows how to armor himself with humor. It was just one of 1,000 tiny cuts, but 1,000 tiny cuts are how you bleed out without anyone noticing. I wish I could tell you I defended him loudly and always. I didn't. I believed in the long play. If I kept bringing him to dinners and birthdays and barbecues where people made the same jokes every year and reheated the same resentments, surely they'd adjust. They didn't. And slowly, my boy got smaller at their table. He stopped making jokes and started nodding at questions, stopped bringing his sketchbook, stopped trying to use a language nobody else wanted to learn. He taught himself to disappear because disappearing hurt less than being overlooked in public. I should have stopped bringing him. I should have stopped setting him down like an offering on the altar of their expectations. I kept hoping. While I hoped, he learned silence. The morning after I RSVP'd no, Nate's text came again, as if repetition could make a bad decision look like a policy. "Hope you understand. We're just trying to keep the rule consistent. Nothing personal. Consistent." I put the phone on the counter and got ready for work. The family group chat lit up around lunch the way it always does when drama navigates by homing beacon. "Julia, really? Over one rule? Mom, it's one evening, Mark. Don't punish your brother for a policy. Punish." As if I'd grounded a toddler for coloring on a wall. As if choosing my son was an act of cruelty performed on a grown man in a tux. I typed one message and let it sit there in the chat like a brick. Luca wasn't invited. I'm not attending without him. A long pause. I could feel the silence through the glass. Then, "Mom, he's family." If he were family, his name would have been printed on an invitation. If he were family, he'd have a place card that said Luca, not a rule that said not you. If he were family, the sentence would have been, "We want him there." Not, "We couldn't possibly bend this thing we invented." Excuses rolled in, tidy as puboes. "He's almost 18. It's just a wedding. Plenty of people are leaving their kids at home. We can't make an exception for everyone. We want a peaceful day." They wanted peace the way you want a clean countertop. Wiped down, no crumbs, no evidence of meals prepared by hands that tremble. Peace, provided it didn't require them to rearrange a single centerpiece. No one asked how Luca felt. No one texted Mara to check in. No one wrote, "We messed up." That sentence is expensive for people who measure generosity by how little it costs them. I muted the chat and let them talk to themselves. I wasn't auditioning anymore. I was parenting. For the last decade, Christmas happened at our house whether it wanted to or not. I dragged folding chairs from the basement and tightened loose legs with a hex key. Bought 2 kinds of cider because Mom likes hot with cinnamon sticks and Julia thinks ice will make anything festive. Stocked my father's preferred dark lager, even though he never made it past a second bottle. I roasted. Mara baked her bourbon pecan pie that makes strangers propose marriage. Luca hung lights on the front porch pretending to hate it, then went out at dusk to stare at them like he'd hung a constellation no one else noticed. The whole operation ran like a machine. Predictable, noisy, seasoned with inside jokes. And that machine swallowed my kid every year. This year I didn't plug it in. No group text asking, "Who's bringing what?" No sign-up spreadsheet. No same time as always, with a winky face. No trip to the wholesale store for a pallet of napkins. I didn't announce a boycott. I just didn't win the clock. The texts began anyway. "Julia, what should I bring for dinner?" "Nate, we'll be 5. Let us know what Luca likes." That one almost made me put my fist through drywall. Let us know what Luca likes. As if including him now, in a text, out of season, was generosity we should applaud. I didn't respond. 2 days later my father left a voicemail. "Son," he said, "it's not too late to do the right thing." The right thing. Like I'd wandered off the map. Like they own North. Christmas Day arrived like a soft snowfall, not a parade. We slept in. Luca woke with hair defying physics, Mara shuffled through the kitchen in flannel pants. I didn't shave. Breakfast was leftover lasagna and coffee poured into mismatched mugs with chipped rims. Luca had made cookie cutters out of aluminum strips and hot glue. A crooked boot, a bird with an enormous head, a star so lopsided it looked like it had been through something. We frosted them and put eyes on all of them, even the ones that weren't supposed to have eyes. Everything deserves to be seen, Mara said, dotting pupils onto a boot until it looked haunted. We howled laughing until we had to put the piping bag down and breathe. We watched a terrible action movie with more explosions than dialogue and a plot with holes big enough to drive a snowplow through. Luca pointed out continuity errors as if he were doing a commentary track no one asked for. It was perfect. In the afternoon, we played poker for jelly beans. Luca smashed us, humming the Jeopardy theme while we surrendered beans like taxes to a benevolent government. "You're a tyrant," Mara told him, and he bowed like a villain accepting a crown. Out of nowhere, Luca looked around the living room, at the shock of cookies, at the pile of beans in front of him, at the dog asleep with a glitter bow stuck to one ear, and said, "This is the best Christmas I can remember." He didn't say it for praise. He said it like he was reporting the weather. I looked at my wife. She looked back, eyes shiny, smile unperformed. That's the look you give someone when a truth lands in the center of the room and refuses to move. There were no piles of presents, no itinerary, no guest bathroom with a candle we light to pretend there's no history there. There was quiet joy, the kind you can't stage, the kind you don't post because if you do it evaporates, leaving the shape of itself behind. The kind that made me understand I didn't miss the noise. I'd missed this. The relief that arrives when you stop pretending people didn't hurt you and stop inviting them to try again. Later, Luca ducked into his room and came back with a sketch he'd done that morning. The three of us on the couch, Mara's head thrown back mid-laugh, my hands around a mug that read "World's Okayest Dad," Luca with a heap of jelly beans in front of him like a dragon with treasure. "Merry Christmas," he said. I didn't frame it. I set it on the mantel, where we'd have to see it every time we walked by. Not all joy needs archival quality glass. Some of it belongs in the open air, so you trip over it and remember. A few days after, snow sifted like powdered sugar across the yard. Luca sprawled on the rug with his sketchpad balanced on a knee, socked foot tapping in a rhythm only he could hear. I was folding towels on the couch, pretending the laundry didn't multiply when left unsupervised. "Do you think they'd like me more if I was your real kid?" he asked, drawing while he asked it, like you might ask if we needed milk. It hit me so hard I put the towel down without folding it. I looked at him. He didn't look back. The pencil kept moving. I wanted to say, "That's ridiculous." I wanted to lie to him because it would be softer. I wanted to bring down the ceiling with a speech about love and blood and being chosen. But he didn't need poetry. He needed truth. "They might have pretended better," I said, careful with each word. "But their problem isn't with you." He nodded like I'd confirmed a math problem he'd solved years ago. "I don't think I want them to like me anymore," he said. He didn't spit it like an insult. No hard edge. Just clarity. The sound a lock makes when you realize the door was never for you, and the hallway is warm if you step away. He went back to his drawing. Conversation over. Freedom declared without ceremony. He didn't need me to fix it. He had set himself loose. I was the one catching up. After New Year's, my father texted, "Your mother can't sleep. You've shut us out." "That's not you. That's not you" is the family's favorite line. It's what they say when the version of you who makes their life easy walks away and the version who lives with his own spine shows up. "That's not you" really means that's not the you we prefer. The one who swallows and smiles and carries plates to the sink without pointing out who never washes. I didn't reply. That evening, Nate sent a voice memo because he loves the theater of a well-timed recording. "Tom," he said. He's the only person who still calls me by the name I stopped using when I left home. Like he can glue me to a version of me that makes him comfortable by pronouncing it. "This really sucks, man. You always make such a fuss about Luca. I get that you love the kid, but now it feels like you're using him to make a point. That's not healthy. You need to let this go." I stopped the memo before it finished. Blocked the number. I didn't want his voice in my house any more than I wanted a skunk in the pantry. Here's what Nate still didn't get, what none of them got after all this time. Loving Luca isn't strategy. It's not my leverage. It's not how I win an argument. It's showing up every single time until a kid who learned early how to expect less stops looking at the door. They saw obsession where there was protection. They experienced my boundaried love as provocation because accountability makes the comfortable itch. They wanted peace, but the kind they wanted was the kind where I disappear what hurts them to know. Peace that asks you to abandon your child is not peace. It is surrender dressed in a tux. So I let the silence grow. I didn't send a late apology card. I didn't type a paragraph explaining that my refusal was love. I didn't call to say, we should talk, because we shouldn't, not yet. The quiet spoke for me. It said, you drew the line at the door and called it hospitality. I stopped stepping over it. It said, if my son isn't welcome, neither am I. It said, I am not begging for a plate at a banquet where my kid is expected to pass the bread and then sit in the next room. And for the first time, the sensation gathering in my chest wasn't guilt. It was the exact shape of fatherhood. New Year's came and went without fireworks, without countdown texts, without the group photo where we all tilt our heads the same direction and pretend we don't know where the original picture is buried. We made pasta with too much garlic. It's criminal, Luca announced, chewing like judgment. We played an indie card game I bought from a local shop because the art looked like a dream. The rules contradicted themselves 3 times on one card. We laughed until we had to set the cards down and let the laughter finish. At 11, Mara found a bottle of sparkling cider and 3 mismatched mugs with chips, and we clinked. To having no expectations, I said. To rules that make sense, Luca added. Mara raised one eyebrow. To chaos in a box. We drank. I realized I wasn't missing anything. Not the scripted countdowns. Not the calls from people who forget Luca exists until it's time to send a group text. Not the way I used to keep one eye on my phone, waiting to see if maybe this would be the year someone said the right thing. My phone stayed on the counter. Midnight happened without fanfare. We said, oh, Happy New Year. Like we'd misplaced a pen and found it again. The world didn't end. We kept playing. A week into January, I opened the fridge for milk and almost closed it on my own breath. Luca had taped one of his sketches to the freezer door, the 3 of us at the kitchen table in our pajamas. Mara mid-eye roll, laughing. Me with my world's okayest dad mug. Luca halfway out of his hoodie, a jelly bean in his mouth, grinning like he'd stolen something from a dragon and gotten away clean. Above our heads, in his blocky handwriting, he'd written one word. Family. No asterisk. No almosts. No step, foster, technically, or by marriage. Just the word that had been waiting for us this whole time at our own table. I stood there with my hand still on the fridge door, cold air hugging my shins, and stared until the edges of the paper went blurry. Years I'd spent building bridges, with holiday roasts and spare folding chairs and an optimism that looked like denial if you squinted. Years asking folks who didn't want to make room to please scoot over and let my kid sit. I'd walked Luca across those bridges over and over and over like maybe this time they'd meet us halfway. They never did. I kept stepping into their house because leaving felt like failing. I was wrong. The failure wasn't stepping back. The failure was mistaking endurance for love and hoping loud enough to drown out truth. I didn't take the sketch down. I didn't frame it. I didn't preserve it behind glass to prove to anyone that joy had visited. I left it taped up between a coupon for a pizza place that's always late and a sharpened note reminding me to buy oat milk. That's where love lives. In the places you pass a dozen times a day, in pencil lines and scotch tape. A week later, snow made the city quiet again, the way snow does. I chopped vegetables in the kitchen and listened to Luca's pencil scratch in the next room. The dog snored like a broken machine. Mara sang under her breath while she set out bowls. My phone buzzed on the counter. A number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Something in my gut said pick up. Mark? A woman's voice said cautious. It's Vanessa, Nate's fiancée. My fingers tightened on the knife. Vanessa. She took a breath. I wanted to say I'm sorry. About the rule. About not pushing back. I asked. He said it would be too messy. I didn't try hard enough. I looked toward the living room. Luca leaned over his sketchbook, hood up, a piece of hair sticking out like a question mark. For a second I saw him at 5, at 10, at 12. I saw my own hands at all those ages learning how to build without blueprints. Thank you for calling, I said. I appreciate you saying it. I don't expect anything, she added quickly. If you ever want to talk. Or if Luca, she stopped herself. Sorry. I just wanted you to hear a voice that understood. Thank you, I said again. Do what you believe in next time, even if it's messy. I will. she said, and I believed her, and we hung up. I didn't tell Luca, not because it was a secret, but because that apology wasn't going to be a new map for us. The map was already on the freezer door. For weeks, the family's texts pinged into silence and fell away, the way rain sometimes finds a new gutter and stops pounding your windows. When the wedding happened, I didn't check social media. I didn't look for photos. Someone mailed us an 8 by 10 professionally printed shot of 100 grinning faces holding flutes of champagne up toward a chandelier, the kind of picture you put on a mantle to prove you're a village. I slid it into the drawer with the tape and the extra batteries. I didn't hate it. I didn't need it. On the day of the ceremony, we drove to the lake. Frost rimmed the docks. Luca walked the shoreline with his hood up and his hands deep in the sweatshirt pocket like he was storing warmth for later. Mara took pictures of ice in the reeds because she's that kind of person. She can look at broken things and find where the light gets in. We bought gas station hot chocolate and drank it in the car with the heat on full blast, windows fogging, the radio low. We told stories that had nothing to do with the people who weren't with us, which felt like a muscle finally allowed to move after months in a cast. Luca leaned his head on my shoulder in that casual way teenagers forget they're allowed to be tender. "Thanks for not going," he said, like the thought had just occurred to him even though it had been planted in both of us for weeks. "Thanks for inviting me to stay," I said back, and he huffed a laugh that fogged the glass. That night, after Luca was asleep and the dog had settled into his companionable wheeze, I went to the freezer for ice and found myself lingering again, reading that blocky word at the top of the page like it was sacred text. Family. I thought about every argument I'd ever lost because I fought fair with people who were playing by rules designed to keep them comfortable. I thought about how many holidays I'd hosted like a penance. I thought about how Luca had asked me to stop trying to earn him a seat somewhere that had never been meant for him. Revenge is a sharp word. People expect fire and wreckage. But sometimes revenge is softer. Sometimes it sounds like no and feels like warmth instead of winning. Sometimes it's the deliberate removal of your joy from spaces that mistreated it, the gentle relocation of your celebrations to rooms where everyone has a name on the basket. The next time the group chat came alive with birthdays and brunches and who's bringing what, I looked at the freezer, at the sketch, and typed a sentence I should have learned to write sooner. "We won't make it. Hope the day is lovely." Nobody can argue with that line for long. It doesn't ask. It doesn't explain. It marks a boundary and waters the lawn on your side of the fence. Word got around town the way it does in places like ours, at the coffee shop, at the hardware store, in the aisle where they keep the good cinnamon sticks. People asked in careful voices, "You okay?" I told them the truth. "We're good," I said. "We're learning how to be small and right instead of big and wrong." The people who liked me for my pot roast looked confused. The people who loved me looked relieved. The next December, Julia texted in early Advent. "Where are we doing Christmas?" I waited half a day, not as a tactic, but because I was busy taking my students to the State House for a field trip, and wrote, "We're doing ours here, just the three of us. You all can handle yours. Send a picture." We stayed home. We burned the rolls. Luca put eyes on every cookie again because he believes in being seen. I taped his new sketch to the freezer, 3 figures at a table, a dog underfoot, a word above us that doesn't need to be defended. In the evening, we walked the neighborhood and counted deer in the yards like lawn statues come to life. We came inside with cold ankles and hot faces and ate soup that was too salty but honest. No one knocked. No one told me I was better than this or worse than this. No one called to say we miss your energy. We didn't miss mine either. We had enough. On a blindingly bright afternoon in late January, I was stacking graded essays when the office dropped a brown envelope on my desk at school. "Return address, my father." I held it for a minute, the way you hold something that contains a kind of weather. Inside, a handwritten note. "Son," it read, "I'm sorry for how this went. I should have adjusted faster. Your mother is stubborn. So am I. I hope someday we all eat together again. I miss your pot roast." I didn't bring it home. I replied from my desk. "Dad," I wrote, "thanks for the note. I love you. When you're ready to say Luca's name first, our door is open. Until then, we're good here." It wasn't a dare. It was a map. He hasn't taken it yet. He might not. I can't make him. That's not surrender. That's sanity. On the first warm Saturday of spring, Luca and I wheeled my old charcoal grill onto the back patio. He sketched while I failed at achieving even heat like I do every year. The neighbors' kids kicked a soccer ball in the alley, faces flushed, hair stuck to their foreheads in sweaty commas. Mara came out with lemonade and sunglasses and the grin that made me marry her. Luca tore a page from his pad and handed it to me. He'd drawn the grill spewing smoke and me waving it away like it was an uninvited guest. He'd given the smoke eyes this time, big dopey ones, and a speech bubble that said, "Season me with boundaries." I laughed until I had to sit down on the steps. "You're impossible," I told him. "Only if you keep inviting me to your weddings," he said, and grinned that dragon treasure grin again. I taped that sketch above the freezer one day later, where it overlapped the corner of the Christmas, drawing the way years overlap when you're paying attention. Untidy, honest, beautiful. I looked at both and thought, this is revenge. Not the scorched earth kind. The thriving anyway kind. The kind the unwelcome never predict because they don't imagine life exists beyond their guest list. We will eat with my family again someday, maybe. They'll bring a side dish like an apology, and I'll make too much food anyway. And we'll do that dance families do where forgiveness and memory both show up and have to sit next to each other. When that happens, Luca's name will be on a place card written in my hand larger than it needs to be. If it doesn't happen, we'll be here, at the kitchen table, on the sofa with a bad movie, in the yard counting stars while the dog snores like an old engine. A year from now, someone will ask me how we fixed it. I'll tell them we didn't. We stopped pretending it wasn't broken and built something else with the pieces that said yes. I'll tell them the only invitation that matters is the one you tape to your own freezer door. The only RSVP you need to check is the one your kid writes in blocky letters above a drawing of you and yours. It contains one word. It is enough.